Okay, Riboi. Welcome to the Kines Torah. Very good minigis. We have a Kines Torah after each Horabim, and maybe we're learning this year in Yeshiva, learning Sefer Aizenman, and we have Rabbi Aizenman. He has a very interesting topic relevant to Aizenman and the Maisa, the Alter Rebbe. Ask Rabbi Aizenman, please begin. Kines Torah.
Before I start, I want to make an akdama, a shtickle akdama, in the gear to halacha b'chlal. About a century ago, the light bulb was invented, and people started using the light bulb in a house. It became a household item. There's a shaila: what's the status of the light bulb when you get to Shabbos? Is it mutter? Is it aser? It's something new. What is it? It's not so clear. Is electricity aser to use in Shabbos? Mutter to use? It was a vikuach. It was an argument. In the beginning, some Rabbanim wanted to say maybe it's not deraisa. Maybe it's not even derabbanim. Maybe it's mutter. And the Gedolei Yisrael in that generation, they got into the Indian, and they were mevarer that it's an Isser Deraisa. A light bulb, an old-fashioned light bulb, incandescent light bulb, has a wire, and it turns red hot, or even it glows even to yellow or to even white. It becomes very bright. It's a gecheles shel mateches, like we're learning now in Rambam. Gecheles shel mateches. You're making a gecheles, it's perfectly fire. But in order to bring out the point, they say that Reb Chaim Oizer, Vilna was the Gedolei Yisrael at the time, he used to say Havdalah for a shtickle tzeit, and Havdalah used to say Beirei Ma'orei Ha'esh on a light bulb. Why? So people should understand, this is not a joke, this is a very serious thing. You say Beirei Ma'orei Ha'esh on a light bulb. And now everybody knows, from a Yid knows, electricity could be deraisa. Furthermore, stam electricity, not a light bulb. It's not so pashut. Who says it's aser? Where does it say that electricity is aser? To use something that doesn't have a spark. Chachamim, the Gedolei Yisrael came up, got into the Indian, and they learned that no, it's Isser Moilid. Isser Moilid derabbanan. It's Isser Moilid. Now it doesn't say that Isser Moilid is electricity, but that was something that if you learn the Indian b'oimek or b'iyun, that's what they came up with. And now it's pashut. Everybody knows. There's no argument about it. What these two dugmais I'm trying to show is that it could have gone the other way. This could have been something if it wasn't popularized, if it wouldn't be so forcefully presented in the beginning when the Shaila started. If it wouldn't be popularized, it wouldn't become a pashut, then adayim would have tzaris. One shul they use electricity, they turn on things on Shabbos, and the other shul, it would be a whole argument. It would be, if you're from this shul, you use electricity. If you're from that shul, you don't use electricity. I'm saying the Eibishter helped, Baruch Hashem. This thing is a davar pashut. You're from a Yid. If you follow the Shulchan Aruch, you know the electricity is us. And this is a davar pellet, because if you think about it, it could have been a big machlokes, and then Reb Mamish would be the Torah would be like shtei Torahs, because our whole life is around electricity. During the week, we use electricity all the time. And Baruch Hashem, there's no time snagging, don't use electricity, and do, or fakert, or Yekes do use it, and Litvisha don't use it. Today, it's a davar HaPashut. However, there's things that weren't so pashut. There was arguments that weren't so pashut. That Ada Yoim is vikuchim about. Well, so I want to suggest in the Kuda that from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, and I want to suggest that you should popularize it. Meaning to say, the Alter Rebbe, everybody knows that the Alter Rebbe is miyuchet, but people don't know that the Gedolei HaPoskim right that Alter Rebbe is different than other Achreinim. The Alter Rebbe is like Achad HaRishonim. The Alter Rebbe, you can be medayik his lashon, and you can be mechadash halachos. In other Achreinim, and even in some Rishonim, there's a limit to how much you can be medayik. You can't create a whole binyan based on a deal. It doesn't work like that. You can't. You have to understand the general idea. What's the general kavanah? If you start to be medayik and asking why do you say it like this, why do you say it like that, you might go b'derech hakalasim. You may make a big mistake. The Alter Rebbe is different. The Alter Rebbe, we see clearly that every word and he's coming to be for shilas and to be miyaseh b'yisoidus and to be magder agdaris. And if you understand it, if you learn it well and the iyon ba'omek, you could understand solutions to big questions, and you could also have a new havana in the inyan. So there are things, for example, like sakinim elutashim. It's not in Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. The sakinim elutashim Alter Rebbe Miyaseh, it's Klal Yisrael knows about it. It was popularized. Once it was popularized, it was just for political reasons. There was rejections for it in the beginning, but then it's a no-brainer. Everybody has sakinim elutashim. Everybody sees the Maila. And there's come inyanim like that, the Gedolei Yisrael were mechadash, and it was well accepted. Here, I want to discuss about a mevucha, a certain question that whoever deals with this question sees it's a painful question. Because you have mina kotze ela kotze. The place can discuss the shaila. What's the kavanah in the Rishonim? What's the kavanah in the lashon of Shulchan Aruch? There's opinions, mina kotze ela kotze, what this means. And it's a huge difference for halacha, how to keep Shabbos. And it's just a mevucha. It's just a plunter. It's a mevucha. It's a mevucha means like a quandary. It's a problem. And I want to suggest if you look at the Alter Rebbe, we see a solution to this. Now it's not known that you see a solution. I saw the new Piskei Teshuvos on Hilchos Shabbos, on Hilchos Eruvin. There's a new Piskei Teshuvos that came out. I saw that he's merames. He says from the lashon of the lashon of Alter Rebbe is mashma like I'm going to say, but he doesn't say how it's mashma in the lashon. But I was happy to see that he says from the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch Harav is mashma one way. I'm going to get to what the way is, but you see that he found it. He found that in the Kuda. So it has to be popularized. That's why I give this akdama. Because if it's going to be popular, if it's going to be spoken about, if it's going to be published, if somebody else is going to say it, another person is going to say it, another person is going to say it, eventually people are going to chapzach that there is a certain clarkite in the kavanah over here, and maybe it's going to make an influence. It's hard because it's not the beginning. It's not the beginning of the shaila. It's not like electricity that in the tzaddiks already this was already settled. Rabbi Shlomo Auerbach was a younger manchik, and he wrote a whole book, and he based on the science and based on the halacha, and he settled the question. Here, it's not a settled question, and people are already used to it, and Hegel Naisa Teva, and people are used to just being makel, but there's still, you never know. You never know. Once something is influenced, there's new chumras that come out, that people will eventually take on. So that's why I'm putting this forth, that you should know whenever this is discussed, bring out a Shulchan Aruch and show it to them. Okay, that's the hakdam. What's the inyan itself? What's the inyan itself? The inyan itself is a very famous argument. It says in Shulchan Aruch the following lashon. It says in Shulchan Aruch like this. Eizer Reshus Rabbi. What is Reshus Rabbi? Rechoivos, squares, public squares, shvakim, marketplaces, harechavim, yud vav amma, 16 amas wide, squared. The eina mekurim, they can't have a roof. If it has a roof, it's not a Reshus Rabbi deraisa. The eina mechoima, it can't have a wall surrounding it completely. Even if it does have a wall, if it's open, if there's one area of this enclosed area that's open from one side to the other side, straight, open, so then this enclosed area could still be Reshus Rabim. And these are Reshus Rabim. V'yesh oimrim, having Reshus Rabim, it is Reshus Rabim. Then the Mechaber says, V'yesh oimrim, and some say, Shekol she'ein Shishim Riboi oivrim boi b'chol yom ein Reshus Rabim. Some say that kol, any place, she'ein oivrim, it says kol, any, we'll have to see what this kol means in a second, but let's just say any place, she'ein Shishim Riboi oivrim boi b'chol yom, any place that 600,000 people do not pass through every day, pass in it every day, is not Reshus Rabim. So, this is a very important halacha. Why is this a very important halacha? Because in order to carry on Shabbos in the modern times, we have to make a string and pole eruv. It's Tzuras HaPesach eruv. Tzuras HaPesach eruv is good, but there's one chisar. If it's a Reshus Rabim de'oraisa, it doesn't take effect. It cannot enclose a Reshus Rabim de'oraisa. So that's the question. Is the cities or the towns that we want to enclose, are they Reshus Rabim de'oraisa or not? If it's Reshus Rabim de'oraisa, you need a full wall with doors that actually prevent passing through. If it's not Reshus Rabim de'oraisa, string and pole is good enough. Tzuras HaPesach is good enough. So that's why it's such an important question. What is Reshus Rabim de'oraisa? So we know it has to be 16 amas wide. Fine. So the streets have to be 16 amas wide. Actually, we didn't speak about streets yet. We're speaking about marketplaces and town squares. Marketplaces, a town square has to be 16 amas by 16 amas. That's one condition. It can't have a roof. It can't be covered. It's another condition. Fine. But then there's a Shiloh Machlokes whether it could be Reshus Rabim de'oraisa with Stam Rabim. Rabim, multitudes of people come there, or you need to have a tremendous amount of people there every single day. 600,000 people have to be passing there every day. That would be a condition for Reshus Rabim de'oraisa. Now, this yesh b'derech klal stam v'yishayim halacha kistam. B'derech klal, if the Mechaber says a halacha and then he says yesh oimrim, we follow the first opinion. Because the first opinion he didn't bring in the name of a yesh oimrim. So we should follow the first opinion. So the second opinion is not relevant to us. We should follow the first opinion. However, Alter Rebbe already says the minig in the Medinas, in our area, the minig is to be makel, to rely on the second opinion. The minig is to rely on the second opinion. The minig is that if there's no 600,000 people, we do enclose with a string and pole eruv, with the Tzuras HaPesach eruv, even a place of 16 amas, even a marketplace of 16 amas, as long as there's not 600,000 people, the minig is lahaka. Now the Rebbe says not to be moicha on people who are mekel, yesh la'am mishi yismoichu, they have who to rely on. Who do they have to rely on? Rashi. Tosis also brings the Mahag about from the Goinim. There is who to rely on. Although the Alter Rebbe writes from the Magid Mishnah, from the Ramban, that we don't find such a thing in the Gemara. The Gemara never mentions that Reshus Rabim has to have 600,000 people. You know that the Gemara doesn't say that. However, Rashi and the Goinim are good enough to rely on that 600,000 people is a requirement. Why should it be a requirement? Because we find in the Gemara several times that it has to be doim l'diglei midbar. The Reshus Rabim has to be exactly like it was Reshus Rabim when the Yidden encamped in the midbar. That's how we know that it can be covered with a rooftop. The Gemara says in Shabbos Daf Hey that it has to be doim l'diglei midbar. That's why it's not mekurah. So derech zeh, Rashi tells us that
was it covered in the midbar?
With the Anania covered, the kasha, the first one has the kasha. Yeah. But if you're going to cover Reshus Rabim with Anania covered, it's still going to be Reshus Rabim. Anyway, so the derech zeh, the 600,000 people is a requirement because the Reshus Rabim in The Midbar had 600,000 people. Fine. So Yeshua Mishi Smeichel, you could be Mekel, you could put up a Suras Pesach, and people could carry and Shalom Al Yisrael. That's the minute. Here comes the question. The question is like this. What does the Mechaber mean? What does the Beis Yosef mean? What does the Rashi mean? What does the Svalachas Gedolos mean? What do they mean when they say Shishim Riboi Oivrim Boi B'chol Yom? Does it mean that in every marketplace you have to have 600,000 people every day? Or in every street you have to have 600,000 people every day in order to say that street is Reshus Horabim? Or, like some want to say, maybe it's enough that this city has a population of 600,000 people. If the city has a population of 600,000 people, they could potentially come to the marketplace. So if there's
Why would you count the city?
Who counts as a person?
Who counts as a person? So we count Goyim. It's a machlokes, but we count the Ma'aser, we count Goyim also. And men and women. Although in the Midbar, 600,000 people without the men. It was only the men. We have men, women, children. What?
Old and sick people.
Old and sick people that don't go about, right. Old and sick people that won't go about, won't move, babies that won't get out of the house, that you can't count them. But people that do go out to the streets, perhaps it's enough that the city has people that go out in the city, 600,000 people every day. It sounds like that from Rashi. From Rashi it sounds like that. Several times it says the city. But if you look in the Mechaber, the Lashon Mechaber doesn't look like that. In the Lashon Mechaber it's mashma that in the Reshus Horabim you have to have 600,000 people Oivrim Boi B'chol Yom in the actual Reshus Horabim. It's not just enough in the city. So in the 50s, in Tafshin Yud, Moshe Feinstein was asked about making Erev around Manhattan. And he discusses this shaila. I think it's a Pella, but I think he's like the first person to discuss this question. What does it mean? Do you have to have 600,000 people in every specific road, or it's enough that there's 600,000 people in the city? It's such a basic question. It should have been discussed. But he raises this question. And he says that from the Mechaber Taki, he's not 100% sure. L'maisa, his psak is that if there's 600,000 people in an area of Yud Beis Mil and Yud Beis Mil in the streets every day, so it doesn't have to be in a specific street, it's enough to consider this area. Yud Beis Mil, by the way, was the territory, was the space of Machne Yisrael, of the encampment of the Yidden in the Midbar. So you have 600,000 people around in the streets every day, so it's Reshus Horabim. So if you have 3 million people living in Manhattan, in an area of Yud Beis Mil and Yud Beis Mil, so you can assume that 600,000 people are in the streets every day.
How big is it?
What?
How big is
Yud Beis Mil. How big is Yud Beis Mil? Let's make a cheshbon. How much is a mil? A kilometer. A mil is better a kilometer. So 12 kilometers on 12 kilometers. How much is a kilometer?
0.6.
0.6 of a mile. So it's less than 6 miles. What?
7 miles.
7 miles?
7.6 times 12.
Okay.
7.2.
Fine. So B'meila like this comes out like this. From everything we said so far, comes out like this. That the minig l'hakel you can rely on to make an Erev, a regular Erev, in a town, in a small town, in a town of 100,000 people, 200,000 people, a city of 100,000 people, 200,000 people, no problem. You're talking about millions of people, then you come into a question. Millions of people, Rabbi Feinstein says, if there's millions of people, you can assume that there's going to be 600,000 people every day in the streets. So therefore, it's going to be considered Reshus Horabim Deraisa, and you can't make it Eruv. For many years, that was the thing in New York, that there was no Eruv. Till about 1980, whatever, there was no Eruv, not in Brooklyn, not in Manhattan. That was the minute. Based on Moshe and some other Rabbanim that supported Moshe's position. And that was the minute. Now, we have a tshuva of Menachem Klein. Menachem Klein made the Eruv in Borough Park. In Tafshin Men, 1980. He made the Eruv in Borough Park. 79, 80, he worked on the Eruv. It was a big fight. And instead of the Chassidisha snipping the Eruv, instead of the Chassidisha being machmer, the Litvisha being makel, was fakir. The Litvisha were snipping the Eruv. And the Chassidisha were putting it up every week. It was an interesting fight. No, fight is never a nice thing, a
When they
beautiful thing.
expanded it to plot.
What?
When they expanded it to plot, like, things went crazy.
When was that?
Probably 5 years later.
5 years later.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Menachem wrote a tshuva. He wrote a tshuva, and he says, I can understand how did Moshe Feinstein could say, how could Moshe say that you count the 600,000 people in the city? How did you count it in the city? First of all, the Lashon of the Mechaber, over boy, is mashma in the Reshus Rabbi. Not in the city, it doesn't say in the city. The city is Lashon Akeva, has to be over boy. Over boy is mashma in the Reshus Rabbi itself. And he brings from many Rishonim that it's mashma that you don't count the city. From Bali Atosis, Rashi Taka says sometimes Be'ir, Shishim Riboi Be'ir. Rashi several times says Ir Shishim Riboi Nechrasim Ba. But from Rishonim, the Tosis in Shabbos in Daf Samach Aleph and in the Ran brings the Bala Trumas and other from the Bali Atosis, the Rashi and the Bali Atosis, they mention this lashon of Shishim Riboi over boy. It's mashma that in the Reshus Rabbi, not in the city. You don't count the city. And the Mela, he says, and he brings one. This is one of his yisodos. He has a few reasons why he made the Eruv, even in New York, even in a big city like New York. But one of his reasons is because this cannot be acceptable. This yisod, the Moshe said that Shishim Riboi is counted by the city, is not acceptable. Shishim Riboi has to be 600,000 in the Reshus Rabbi. What? Yeah, so they say even Ocean Parkway, they counted, it doesn't come to
Over
600,000.
what period of time?
What? Over a day. Over a 24-hour day, they say, it's not B'chol Yom. It's not 600,000 people. There's no street that has 600,000 people every day. It's very rare. Maybe somewhere in the Far East.
I mean, the World Trade Center had 2 million people a day passing through.
Oh wow. 2 million people a day.
2 million people a day.
Okay. Okay, but in Brooklyn, I don't know if there's such a thing.
Brooklyn and London.
Every day means every day, or just like this is the normal thing to happen?
That's also an argument. The Mishnah Berurah says every day. Where does every day come from? Where does that come from? It says Tamid in the Rashi, in Tadir, Tamid in the Rashi, in the Ritva, quotes the Rashi like that. But where's this idea of every day, mamish, every day? But the Menachem brings Sefer HaTrumis. Sefer HaTrumis, the Ran brings the Sefer HaTrumis in Shabbos, and he says this lashon. He says Shishim Riboi B'chol Yom.
In Midbar it's like that.
In the Midbar was like that. Oh. Yeah. Oh, so now the question is like this: in the Midbar Taka, was it like that? Where was the Reshus Rabbi in the Midbar? There's a Gemara in Shabbos Daf Hey that's clear that even the way the Midbar was, the way the camp in the Midbar, we know how did they camp? There was the Mishkan, Machne Shechina, around that Machne Leviyah, and there was 4 sections of Machne Leviyah, and Moshe and Aaron were in one section. And then there was the 4 Galim, 4 sides, and each Degel had 3 Shvatim. There were pathways. It says in the Gemara there were pathways from each Degel to come to the Machne Leviyah, to come to Moshe Rabbeinu. It's clear in the Gemara in Daf Hey, and the Charein bring this as a raya, that the Gemara in Daf Hey says that also the pathways going from the edge of Machne Yisrael to Moshe Rabbeinu's tent, it's all Reshus Rabbi. Now, why would there be 600,000 people in every one of those pathways? It's actually fakert. It was miyuchat for those people that live on one side. Why would they be on the other side? However, there's a Rashi in Daf Tzadik Ches, in Daf Tzadik Zayin. Rashi Tzadik Vav base. Rashi says, "Shahakol mitzuyim etzel Moshe." In Reshus Rabim, he says when the Gemara brings the raya, how do we know that Hayitzah is a malacha? So he says because it says. They call it ha'am. The people who brought the donations, they stopped bringing their donations. The pasuk calls it a malacha. The Gemara says, "Al yasu ish al yasu oid malacha." They call it ha'am. So Rashi says, why is that a malacha to bring donations? Why is that a malacha? So he says because they're bringing it from their tents and they're bringing it to Moshe, and Moshe Rabbeinu's Machne Leviyah is Reshus Rabbi because hakol mitzuyim etzel Moshe. Hakol mitzuyim etzel Moshe. 600,000 people are by Moshe. Now, if you want to say that you need every Reshus Rabbi specifically to have 600,000 people every day, So then some raise the question: who says 600,000 people by Moshe every day? It says Vayakel Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu had chatzotzos to call the people to come once in a while. He didn't have 600,000 people every day by him. But the Menachem says no. They came every day to learn Torah from Moshe and to daven b'tzibur. He says, and Menachem says, and then he says for sure they came to daven b'tzibur. So he says they had 600,000 people in Machal Leviah every day. But he doesn't. I don't see that he answers the question. What about the pathways coming to Machal Leviah? Anyway, this is a mevucha. This is a mevucha because it's mina kotze la kotze. Do you say that you have to have every street Reshus Rabim means there's no Reshus Rabim in this world, in the entire globe today? There's no Reshus Rabim because there's no place that has. We don't know of a clear place that has a street. I don't know about the World Trade Center. The World Trade Center already doesn't exist. I mean,
It's not a street, it was covered. It was indoors.
what? It was indoors, but I'm saying to get there.
Yeah.
I'm saying to get there, they had to.
People coming in and out. Yeah.
Right, so
That Times Square a little bit.
with 600,000 people every day. Okay.
All about we used to be.
Yeah, okay, could be. And
Now they live there.
Post-COVID is a different world, by the way. Sandra. Post-COVID is a different world. I don't know. Did you recover?
No, before it was.
Before.
And who said it has to be? Maybe we don't have partnerships.
Maybe we don't have. Maybe we don't have. But the question is,
I know that she's allowed, but I'm not.
the question is, did he ever have? Was there ever such a city? He's saying there was a time. It says Yerushalayim was Yerushalayim. What?
In the Midbar, how many total people were there in the Midbar? So if there was 600,000 just men,
So 2 million. Let's say 2 million.
2 million. Statistically, it was almost impossible to have 600,000
Every day in one location. Right.
Time.
Anyway, I don't want to get into all the details because this question you could go on and on and on. I just want to say one thing from Alter Rebbe, and I hope that you accept it. If you accept it, then carry the word. One likud. In the Mechaber, there's a very major difference between the way that the Mechaber lays out this halacha and the way that Alter Rebbe does. The Mechaber, when he brings this condition of 600,000, he brings it behemshech to rechayvos v'shvakim, like I just read to you. He brings it when he get to squares, public squares, and marketplaces. And then he says, v'yesh emrim, Shishim ribi b'chol yer. Then, in the next halacha, the Mechaber brings the halacha of muvayis ha-mefulashim. Muvayis ha-mefulashim, what does that mean? Really, muvayis ha-mefulashim is a street. It's a street. A mavoi means people live on the side of the street, but really, what is a mavoi? A mavoi means people don't come there to stay there. People don't come there to do something there. People come there to pass through to get from one place to another. That's what a mavoi means. So Reshus Rabim really, there's really three names that we have. The Bryce and Shabbos Navav says there's 3 or 4 kinds of Reshus Rabim. There's a sratya, means a highway from city to city. There's a platya, which is a square, a public square, or a marketplace. And there is muvayis and fulashim. Muvayis and fulashim means, Rashi says, and Alter Rebbe says, and the Mechaber says, muvayis and fulashim means a street that takes you from one platya to another platya, or from one sratya to a platya, from a platya to a sratya. Meaning, a street that connects 2 primary Reshus Rabbis. So muvayis and fulashim connects 2 Reshus Rabbis within the same city. And that's also Reshus Rabbim. Oh. This halacha, Muvayis and Fulashim, then Mechaber brings separately. And it's understood why he brings it separately. What?
There's not other people in that movement.
1 second. We don't know. We don't know. It doesn't have to have 600,000 people or not. Just like we don't know if a marketplace has to have 600,000. We don't know. But there's something unique about a mavoi. We know the Reshus Rabim has to have 16 amos. The space from one end to the other the width has to be 16 amos. A house has to have at least a length of 16 amos too. But if you're talking about a street, there has to be at least wide 16 amos for people to pass. By Muvayis and Fulashim, we see it's different. Allah is different. Muvayis and Fulashim, there is 2 opinions, but both of them maintain that it doesn't have to be 16 amos. To one opinion, the Rashba and Tosfos, it could even be much less than 16 amos. Either 4 tefachim, like the Gira says, like Alter Rebbe says some places, or some say 10 tefachim, but it could be very, very narrow. What's the logic of that? So they say, the Rashba and the Tosfos, they say, because it's really not a Reshus Rabim for itself. is just an extension, just a hemshich of the main Reshus Harabim. It's just a hemshich of the main Reshus Harabim. So therefore, it doesn't have to actually have the properties of a full Reshus Harabim. Because if it's going alongside Reshus Harabim, people will pass through, but it's included. And what's the raya of Tosfos? The raya is Bein Amudim. Everybody knows this Tosfos. You all learned the Tosfos in the Eruvin Davav, and a similar Tosfos in Shabbos Davav. It's the same Tosfos. The Tosfos says that just like we find that in a marketplace there's amudim, there's these pillars that the merchants sell they hang their wares to sell, and they have all these amudim that actually are not easy to walk through. What? They're permanent there. The Gemara says that if it is nichet hashmishtei, if it would have been nichet hashmishtei, if it wouldn't be offset, if it would be open, it wouldn't be offset. The way it is, the way these bein amudim were, you have let's say, it's like you build a wall of bricks. So you put bricks, and then the second layer you offset it, or like tiles on the floor, you offset it, right? So the second row is in between. Exactly, you have one in between two. That's the idea of bein amudim. That's why it's not comfortable to walk. But Tosfos says, but if it would be open, you could walk right through the amudim. So then it would be Reshus Harabim. The Gemara says it would be Reshus Harabim, although it doesn't have 16 amas between the amudim. From this, Tosfos learns that you don't need it if people are passing through as a continuation, as a hemshech, as an extension of Reshus Harabim. You don't need 16 amas. Tosfos says the same thing is with a mavoi. If you have a mavoi, a street that's coming alongside Reshus Harabim, taking you from one section of Reshus Harabim to the next Reshus Harabim, so then that alleyway doesn't have to be 16 amma. It could even be 4 tfachim like bein amudim. The concept of 4 tfachim we see in Eruvin when you get to, we just learned it in Rambam, when you get to a well next to Reshus HaYachid. And it says that there's Reshus Harabim between the well and Reshus HaYachid. So then it's a problem to take from the well into your house. And how much does it have to be the minimum to be between the well and Reshus HaYachid? You learned the Gemara yet in Eruvin? How much does it have to be? 4 tfachim. The shear is 4 tfachim. The minimum shear between the well and Reshus HaYachid is 4 tfachim. Bein amudim 4 tfachim. So they say a mavoi. He says Tosfos a mavoi could be 4 tfachim. Oh. Furthermore, the Rashba says, and Alter Rebbe brings us to halacha, that a mavoi of 16 amma, it doesn't have to be 16 amma all the way down. It can be 16 amma on one end and 16 amma on the other end, and even if it narrows down all the way down to it doesn't say 4 tfachim in Alter Rebbe, but that's the mashmos. That's how the Gra learns, and that's the mashmos. And it can narrow down to very, very small. It doesn't have to be anywhere near 16 amma. The Alter Rebbe doesn't give a shear. But in Pashtus he means what he says, but he says later, that the minimum shear in order to still be Reshus Harabim is 4 tfachim. 4 tfachim is enough for one person to go at a time. One person to walk through at a time. It's nichet hashmishtei. Considered noyach. Why? Because one person at a time can walk through. So as long as the mavoi mefulish, not l'oirech, the mavoi mefulish begins 16 and ends 16, even though it's miskaser b'ktsasa, even though it becomes narrow in one part of it, he says the Alter Rebbe, says the Rashba, the halacha, the Mechaber brings it also, it's still considered Reshus Harabim, even though it becomes very, very narrow. So these are the unique factors that make Mavois and Fulashim different than the regular case of Reshus Harabim, of a marketplace, or of a public square, or a highway. Over there it doesn't have those halachas. But when it says Mavoi Mefulish, a mavoi, a street that takes you from one Reshus Harabim, one primary Reshus Harabim to another primary Reshus Harabim, we have all of these chumras that it can still be a Reshus Harabim even though it's less than 16 amma, even though it's much less than 16 amma. So all the places can discuss this, but they say it doesn't have to have 600,000 people every day. Why? Because it's really like bein amudim. Just like you have amudim in the middle of Reshus Harabim, where people hang their wares to sell. You don't expect every single passageway of 4 tfachim to have 600,000 people every day. It's enough that the whole Reshus Harabim has 600,000 people every day, and all you need is a few people to walk through to consider it like a hemshech of the main Reshus Harabim. So too, this alleyway that connects from one Reshus Harabim to the next, You don't need 600,000 people there every day. It's enough that a few people could walk through. And if there's Baki Beit Am, as long as it's not isolated, it's not a private alleyway. As long as it's a hemshech of Rosh Hashanah, the Bnei Rosh Hashanah can walk through. It doesn't need 600,000 people. It can have much less than 600,000. It doesn't even need Rabbim. It's enough that Baki Beit Am, the Rabbim, go through there. Some of the multitudes of the Bnei Rosh Hashanah, they go walk through the bottom. So this is a different halacha. So they say that this halacha doesn't reflect on the regular, the primary Rosh Hashanah has to have 600,000 people in the Rosh Hashanah every day. Now, if you look at the Alter Rebbe, there's an interesting thing. The Alter Rebbe brings the halacha of the 600,000, the condition of 600,000 people every day, after he mentions also Muvayis and Fulashim. He says Rechayvas, Shvakim, Muvayis and Fulashim, and then he says V'yesh Erev Shakol She'ein Erev B'Yishim Shivim B'Chol Yoyim Ein Rosh Hashanah. Now you tell me, could it be going on each one of the Rechayvas, Shvakim, Muvayis and Fulashim? Each one has to have 600,000 people every day? Could it possibly be talking about each one of them particularly? It can't, because Muvayis and Fulashim, the next seif, he says it can be even tiny. So it can't be that the Oivim Boy B'chol Yom is going on each particular. Now I understand the places don't mention this because many places are not ragil to be medayik so much, especially in Alter Rebbe. Meaning they're medayik in the Rishonim and the Gemara for sure. But in Alter Rebbe, lav dafka, every one of the places looked for a solution in Alter Rebbe. But the Piskei Teshuvos, he says, mashma from the Alter Rebbe's lashon that Shishim Riboi B'chol Yom is not the specific Rosh Hashanah. It's going on the entire Rosh Hashanah as one. He says, Mach the Piskei Teshuvos chap that. He chap that. But this is something that needs to be popularized. That's your job. If you heard it here, you spread the rumor. Look in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. Tell me if it makes sense to say that boy is going on the Rechayvos, each one of the Rechayvos, each one of the Shvakim, each one. It doesn't fit. And I'll tell you more than that.
But does it have to connect to Rosh Hashanah?
Sure, it has to connect to Rosh Hashanah on both ends.
So Rav Moshe's answer.
But the question is, what does it mean Shishim Riboi boy? What's the boy? Is the boy going on the Reshus Harabim as one? And I want to say another thing.
It means the major Rosh Hashanah. Now whatever goes out from that doesn't need.
No, but he says,
but
he said
that
Moshe
Main
B'Yach.
Street, Fifth Avenue has to have 600,000, and 37th Street, which will go nicht.
I want to say one nakud that maybe I'm not sure this is going to answer to respond to what you're saying, but I want to say one nakud that really the argument, the way that Menachem sets it up, and many poskim after him that hold his shita, the way they set it up is not the only way to set up the argument. Menachem sets it up like this, and I understand why he sets it up like this because Moshe sets it up like this. Moshe says Shishim Riboi Ba'ir. So Menachem says it doesn't look like that from the Rishonim. It looks like you don't go by the ear, you go by the Reshus Harabim. But really, that's not the only way to explain the machlokes. Really, it's a different argument. When you have a rechayv, a square, and then connected to that square is a marketplace. Connected to that marketplace is another section of a mavay and fulish. And then connected to that mavay, there's another Reshus Harabim. And connected to that Reshus Harabim, there's another mavay. Now, is that all one Reshus Harabim? Or is it each one is a separate Reshus Harabim? As long as there's a continuation of 16 amas, is that considered that there's a hefsek and each Reshus Harabim has its own shame, its own gather, its own klolim, its own tnoim? Or maybe all the Reshus Harabims, as long as there's no section that's completely residential, that doesn't, you can't pass through, meaning it's not whatever, I'm not going to explain what is a hefsek now. I'm not going to get into that. But as long as there's a hemshech in this city, one Reshus Harabim leads you to another Reshus Harabim, leads you to another Reshus Harabim. Maybe you count all the Reshus Harabims as one Reshus Harabim. So when it says Shishim Riboi B'chol Yom, Reb Nash is right. He's right. You don't go by the city. You go by the Reshus Harabim. But what is the Reshus Harabim? Ocean Parkway? Or Ocean Parkway with Eastern Parkway, with all the places that are 16 amas? What? Well, Prospect. And here you can't say, well, it's a Mavai Kimin Dalit. It doesn't. That's not true. And the kuda is if you set up the kasha like this, the machlokes like this, that there's the question is not whether it's be'ir or b'rechayv. The question is each Reshus Harabim separate, or all the Reshus Harabim connect to be one Reshus Harabim? Then the picture looks completely different. then you don't count Shishim Riboi in every street. You count Shishim Riboi in all the streets that are, all the Reshus Harabim that are combined with one hemshech, without a hefsek, then you have to see there's Shishim Riboi. And again, you can't say that if it turns, it's not Reshus Harabim. Because that halacha, that if it turns, it's not Reshus Harabim, it's only if we're not talking about Reshus Harabim atzma. If you're talking about a mavoi with foolish, it's not 16 amen, then it depends. If it's straight, then it has one din. If it turns, then it's not nichet hashmishte, then you don't count it as one. But when you're talking about something that has 16 amen, a voice and fulashim that have 16 amen, and it's la'oirach Reshus Harabim, it's a hemshech of the Reshus Harabim, then it doesn't matter if it turns. If you could have, let's say, if you have a public square over here, and you have a mavi of 16 amen here, and take you to another public square, then you have a mavi of 16 amen here, and take you to another public square, another marketplace. So all of this is one Reshus Harabim. The surah, there's no limitation of how the surah of Reshus Harabim has to be. It's a squiggle or a square or a circle. There's no limitation if it has a 16 amen and it's a Reshus Harabim. It has all the color of Reshus Harabim. It's all one hemshech. It makes one Reshus Harabim. That's the lashon. If you look in the lashon of the Mechaber, lashon al Rebbe, it looks like it. He says, the lashon of the Mechaber is, he says, Ezer Reshus Harabim, Rechoyves b'shvakim, and then he says, the Einam Mekurim, the Einam Choyim, Afil Yesham Choyim, Have Reshus Harabim. They are Reshus Harabim. And he continues, V'yesh Einam Shekol She'ein Shishim Riboi Oivrim Boi. Boi means in Reshus Harabim. And the Alter Rebbe even looks more than that. But the fact that he says they make up Reshus Harabim, these things make up Reshus Harabim. There's no there's no meaning, there's no difference between if it's a public square or it's a marketplace. In Reshus Harabim, there's no classification, no difference if it's this kind of Reshus Harabim, that kind of Reshus Harabim. The point is that this kind of place and that kind of place and that kind of place all make up one classification. And that class is called the Reshus Harabim. And it's all one. So it says Shishim Riboi Oivrim Boi, it means how do you count? You count by including all the sections and seeing in all the sections together do we have Shishim Riboi Oivrim Boi. That is a chumrah. That is taka a chumrah. It comes out there are cities that have that kind of situation where you have Shishim Riboi Oivrim Boi b'chol yom if you count the entire hemshech. I think that if you look inside the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch and you show it to people, I think they could be convinced. I think they'll be convinced, and if they're really convinced, then maybe they'll convince others. And maybe people will take see, like the Piski Chuvas take Echad, that from the Alter Rebbe's lashon, there's no machlokes b'chlal. There's no place to argue. It's clear. It's clear that the Oivrim Boi is going on the entire Reshus, on the entire Reshus Harabim. Now there's more pratim in this. I'm not going to get into it. There's more pratim. I feel like you cannot be mitzaref. You cannot be mitzaref the people. Let's say if you have 500,000 people, but you want to be mitzaref some people that are only found in the muvois that are less than 60 amma. I feel like you can't be mitzaref those people. You have to be mitzaref only the people that are in places that have 60 amma. However, but the general idea is that you don't count every street for itself. You count the streets that make one hemshech of Reshus Harabim. A dead end, if it's a marketplace or it's a square, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But if it's a street that has a dead end and taking you to Amplatya, but the street itself has no purpose in itself, then it wouldn't be a cul-de-sac. It doesn't have to. Anyway, this is the Kitzur Gadol, this is the Dvar of the Kitzur Gadol, but I think that a Kud is clear. Take a look at the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, show it to people, and make them out teicha.
The Shishim really can't be in the entire city.